Hey guys, how's it going? Anthony Muthurajah back with a new video lesson for you all. Before I get to the actual lesson, do subscribe if you haven't already and check out all the other goodies that I have on the channel. And if you have considered joining the channel and you're not too sure about how it's working and what's happening, feel free to reach out to me and ask me what questions you want. It's been pretty fun doing this a little more consistently as opposed to the last few years, really. So I'm pretty excited to see what the rest of this year is going to look like, and of course the new year is going to look like. All right, so I posted a lesson last week about picking hand. Okay, I would say 8 out of 10 lessons with regards to technique on the bass, it's mostly about the picking hand, and it's important for sure. We looked at doubling notes and all that stuff, and there are more exercises you can use along those ideas. But I want to talk about the fretting hand today for a change, because I feel like this hand, your left hand if you're right hand and your right hand if you're left-handed, is possibly the most elusive guy to deal with, because it's as simple as, hey, you just press down, get the note out and play, right? But what you'll find is that after a certain point of playing an X number of years, it varies a lot with different people. You're going to find yourself feeling pretty stuck, okay? That could relate to vocabulary. It could relate to your picking hand. It could relate to a bunch of things, even the music you're playing or what you do for a living. There's so many factors to consider, right? But more than often, I found that, at least with my students, what I saw is that the limitation was not really about vocabulary or content, but it was the fretting hand. Because when we set out to play the bass, right, so we are taught to play the major scale, C major, good old C major, right? We are taught to stay within this system, which I believe they call it the cage system, which is quite the appropriate name because it is nothing more than a cage. Okay, so one of the downfalls of playing this way all the time is that you constantly going vertically up and down. There's no change in motion. Okay, so part of the reason for that is because there is a lack of visual and material to practice that will give you more horizontal access while also looking into the vertical side of things. What do I mean by that? The fretboard for me is all about a diagonal vision. Okay, so if I'm here on this C and I'm in the key of C, okay, just making sure I can see the low C there, my visual takes me all the way up here. Okay, so even if I try to do this without looking, okay, so all the bump spots is because I was just being sure if I'm, getting the right frets. Am I actually comfortable enough to do that? And also because, like I mentioned in the previous video, that my left thumb has been giving me quite a bit of trouble. So I'm just kind of taking things a little chill with that. Okay, so my thumb is kind of getting in the way. But the idea is that you want to be able to visualize the fretboard in its entirety always. This will enable you to play anything, whether it's a triad, arpeggio, scales, a bass line. You'll be able to play it anywhere. Okay, and you wouldn't have to depend on the fret markers alone. In fact, one thing I like about this bass is that the fret markers are not too prominent. So when I first got this bass, it was actually throwing me off a little bit because I got used to fret markers. So I like the fact that this one doesn't have it too blatantly in my face for me to depend on. Okay, so if you feel like you're having trouble in terms of how you translate your material, I have one, or rather 2 simple things you can look into. The first thing is try to play more than 3 notes on one string. Just try. It won't hurt. Okay. So that will immediately break the cage, because on the cage you're playing only 3 notes per string, if you look at it practically speaking. So let's try to play 4 notes. C major, you see, that gave me not just 2 octaves, but it made it flow better. Okay, and how am I achieving this? I'm fretting with the first finger, sliding, and then fret, slide, fret, slide, and then you descend the same way, slide with the pinky. I'm exaggerating the slides, but you don't want that. And you would have noticed by now, when I play up to speed, or anyone for that matter, it's very hard to control these components of, are you sliding with the pinky or ring? That's why I like to practice all the possible ways of fretting my notes, because it allows me to really access the instrument a lot differently. Because if I take 5 notes, do, re, mi, fa, so, that's what you feel it to be under your fingers always. If you play with your first, maybe you do this, right? Or if you have pinky, 3 strings, that's a lot of strings to go through very quickly. Now, is that wrong? No, unless you have some specific purpose for doing this. For me, if I was to do, feels like a waste of energy. I would rather do this. Okay, and I definitely don't want to do this. Okay, now, is there anything wrong? There's definitely nothing wrong. But for me, I move across strings when there really is a necessity for me to do that. Okay, so start by playing at least 4 notes and then try to play 5. And then typically 5 is the technical maximum you can play, because I can play, let's say, C, slide up to D, fret the E, fret F, slide up to G. Any other notes after this on that same string, I'll have to position shift. Okay, so for me, that's one movement. When I have to position shift, that's the next movement. But once you position shift, your movements get limited. Okay, so I can play 5 notes in one movement, and once I shift, that's technically a slide already, and then I can play 5 more notes if I wanted to, and if the space on the fretboard allowed me to. Okay, so these are some simple things to consider. I don't want to go into intense detail with regards to this, but the idea is try fretting more than 3 notes. Okay, play at least 4, then 5. Try to see if you can do 6 in one movement or by position shifting as well. Okay, which brings me to my next point. Whatever you've learned in terms of bass lines, try to play it elsewhere on the fretboard. Okay, I've talked about playing Teen Town, a la Jaco. I probably should rename the title, because the fretting element of it is not like Jaco, because Jaco played it here. First of all, open G, and there. You see, I'm repeating that so much because I'm not used to doing that. And also on a fretless bass, the tension there is insane. So I don't have the physical strength to play it like that. But I learned it this way initially, and then I changed it to accommodate my hands and physical ability. I was able to play it more punchy over here. Okay, and it was just more comfortable for me. For some people, it might not be. That's fine, but you won't know unless you try. There's so many lines I learned over the years quite wrong, and I never corrected it. One of them was Spain, which I corrected. You see, like I'm actually having to think about it. I'm not fluffing around. I'm not bullshitting you in any way, but I learned it a certain way, which was really weird. And I played like that for many years because I never bothered to revise what it is that I was doing with my fretting hand, and I just kept playing. It didn't hurt me, but it just was never comfortable. And then one day, I sat down to rework it, and I felt pretty comfortable. But it's just now I don't remember the notes towards the later part of the phrase, so I'm fumbling a little bit. But generally speaking, these two principles of trying to play more than 3 notes on a string and trying to rework your fretting hand for certain phrases or bass lines will really help you visualize and also just have a broader understanding of how the fretboard is really a huge playground. You can do so much more with it, right? Because for instance, if I took something like this, okay, and let's see, you see those kind of runs that I use, it wouldn't be possible if I never looked into the idea of trying to play more than 3 notes on a string. Because if I only play 3, very awkward. But this way, I get these very cool effects. You see, when I play, generally, I'm very broad with the way I use the fretboard. I don't stay in a box, right? So I hope this helps. All right, I was goofing around just now, but don't mind me. But the idea is play more than 3 notes and then try to rework what you already know. I hope this helps. All right, and I'll see you all in the shed until the next one. Peace.